All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo Podcast, Dota 2 competitive podcast. I'm BreakyCPK, joined by BSJ as always. Welcome and thanks for joining us, BSJ. How are you? How are your holidays, man? How are you doing?
They've been busy, man. I'm not gonna lie. I'm struggling to keep up with like the sleep and everything, but you know, it's good. It's all spending time with family and such. You just got to make sure you get all the stuff done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How about yours?
Doing very well. Actually, spent time with family, of course, and it's obviously a good thing to good time for that with the holidays. My wife's family specifically, and I actually grinded a bit of Dota 2. Believe it or not, I played a lot of Dota 2 over the holidays.
You've played more Dota 2 than I have.
You've watched a lot of Dota 2, to be fair.
Yes,
that's been
I
happening.
have watched a lot.
By the way,
that is absolutely true.
Real quickly, your mic. I don't know if you're using the correct mic. It sounds like it's coming through a little rough.
It was happening earlier, too. Let me check real quick.
Yeah, it almost sounds like the webcam mic right there. Want to make sure we can hear you in all your wisdom, of course, and the clearness that is. So,
how is that?
That is so much better. Yes.
Okay, yeah. I just plugged my mic or my webcam back in, so it definitely must have defaulted somehow to my webcam mic.
All good. All good, man. Well, we're happy to have you once again. Obviously, coming back from the holidays, and again, in your case, it was a little unique. Were you out there for Christmas, or you were back before that?
No,
right?
We got back like the 23rd ish, but you know, it's one of those where we got back on the 23rd, but been traveling for 20 hours, so wasn't exactly like I had like a day of recovery entirely. For whatever reason, when I got there, my sleeping schedule was completely normalized within like the first day or two.
Nice.
But since I've gotten back, I have not been able to string together a normal night of sleep so far. So, you know, cross my fingers that eventually happens. But as of now, it has not.
Well, you got New Year's coming up, so you can just stay up all night for that anyways and ruin your sleep schedule once again.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
There you go. Yeah, obviously being in Singapore, though, that's what we're getting at. So for those that are maybe a little bit confused, BSJ was out in Singapore for the One Esports Dota 2 World Pro Invitational, one of the longest tournament names ever. But the point is,
indeed,
a great event, and at least we expected that going into it, and definitely had some fun results. But first thing, real quickly, something I didn't even realize, and this was brought up by a friend of mine, One Esports, so the organizers, if I'm not mistaken, they're One Sports, which is actually there's some sports company over in the Philippines, I believe.
Yes, they are located in Southeast Asia. I know that much.
Yeah, and they do like, you know, from MMA to just whatever, some big sporting event. So that's something that I think was almost underlooked coming into this. That this was a pretty big deal as far as the sponsorship of this event.
Yeah, they had like a get-together gathering at TI9, so I got to have a brief preview to the fact that they were going to be participating in the Dota season, but obviously it was not my reveal to take part in or whatever. But I think they're also hosting the major later on this season. I think
they did announce that.
Yeah, so they're heavily investing into the esports scene and making sure that they are they're coming in hot. You know, they're not just casually taking a dip in the water. They are full force, and I'm excited. It's always fun to have new investors and new people that seem interested coming from other realms, especially like you said, they are regular sports. So could be a nice crossover for the scene there.
Yeah, and of course in the Philippines, we know the fan base out there, and I'm sure in Singapore yourself, you can, you can suggest that being at the event, being a caster there. What was it like with the fans there and everything? It seems like that's definitely a rowdy fan base.
Yeah, no, they were. I love the two SEA events I've done in my career so far. They're definitely just very passionate. They just enjoy esports in a very pure way. You know, that's really the way I describe it. They're just very genuine. They're just excited to be there. They love watching Dota, and I think that it's just really quite unique to see that, and I love it.
Yeah.
So I thoroughly enjoyed the fans. I had like a small little get together for anyone who wanted to meet me, and it's like it didn't have to be that many people. They just showed up and they were all super fun. You know, the way they want to take pictures. They're just super excited to you could just tell they were happy to be there in general. And there was like, yeah, I love your stream. Or like one of them even gave me like a Chylon Quad t-shirt, just stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't remember ever getting a Chylon Quad t-shirt from someone that wasn't an SCA fan. So quite a unique little bunch.
That's awesome. And, of course, they had a reason to be even a little more excited, perhaps, I guess I could say, going into the event. TNC just coming off their major victory, maybe one of the favorite teams in it. It didn't necessarily play out that way. TNC, they made it out of groups, but they did get knocked out early on. To be fair, it was Davichi Gaming who ended up going all the way from the lower side of the bracket to then win the whole event, taking out EG in the finals, 3-0. Talk about a very good run for them. And again, we mentioned this, really, that this was an event of major caliber. We know that the DPC points weren't on the line, of course, but a $500,000 prize pool, which definitely is a lot of money, as well as the amount of, or the list of teams that were there, including a team like Team Secret, who this was really their first big event themselves of the season. Really cool to see. Really cool to see going in, and the hype was real. But how about Vici Gaming, man? I mean, 3-0 over Evil Geniuses, the run that they had. This team continues to impress out of China.
Yeah, they just steamrolled the event. They really seemed to just grasp what was going on. They came out of the lower bracket from the group stage, meaning that they got 3rd or 4th in their group. So by no means did they just clean sweep the entire tournament. But, I got to have the privilege of casting a few of their series during the main event, and they just always seem to have the draft upper hand. They just seem to understand how to deal with these meta heroes. And the way that I compared to the way TNC seemed to understand like the Morphling Shakers of last patch, and Vici just really seemed to have their grasp on the Pucks, the Dooms, the Vipers. They really seem to have a clear-cut plan on how to play them very well if they first pick them themselves, or how to effectively counter them. Some of the other teams were kind of just by the end of the tournament still doing their own thing, and I think by that point, if somebody else has really adjusted their thing to fit the meta and you kind of just keep doing your own thing, it's going to favor the team that's made the adjustments. And Vici clearly made the best adjustments over the course of the entire tournament. And that's the best part about being a caster at that kind of event. Mm-hmm. Since you're forced to just watch every game pretty much, you do see like the subtle adjustments that these teams make after they lose a game. You see them lose a game, you see how they come into the next series or the next game itself. And Vici was by far the best at that. And even though they came out of the group stage in the lower bracket, they just clean sweeped that playoffs.
Yeah, I got to say props to you as well, by the way. You sent out that tweet after the event suggesting, 500 likes, and you would do the insight for the drafts, and then you're like, wait, no, 1,000, and you got like thousands of likes as a result.
Yeah, I've only had 2 tweets in my entire career that ever got more than 1,000 likes, and it was that one and my TI-8 draft analysis offering. So I guess it is quite humbling, and I do appreciate how much people enjoy that I do that kind of stuff. And I already did make the video and been getting good responses. So I enjoy doing it. And it was just, for whatever reason from that tournament, I was just like, I really want to do this if people want it. I just felt like the drafts it's a new patch. People are not sure what they're watching. Yeah, they know the OP heroes, but they want to know, what's going on with drafting in this new patch. What are teams thinking? And that was the goal of that. So I was glad to see how interested people were in having that content created.
Definitely, yeah. It was. I got to check it out a little bit of it myself, and it was fun to listen to. And I agree with you. I think that's one of those things that the content is lacking. It's understandable, right? Like, obviously you don't expect teams to be going over, this is why we drafted this hero on this, but like, they don't want to give away their strategies. But somebody as yourself, who you're more from the outside, and analyst, of course, on the casting side of things, you can pick up on these cues as far as what the teams are looking at potentially, and bringing the content to life. I know there was it Heen, I want to say? He did something a couple of years back. I don't know if it was for
He did. I remember this.
Yeah, their TI run or something. But I remember that, again, happening, and like the reaction was great, of course. So, but it really is content that certainly lacks. So definitely props for myself, and obviously many out there. Hopefully every single tournament now, BSJ, you're going to be the guy that reviews all the drafts, all right?
Yeah, I'll see if people like it. In terms of, I'll probably do a similar tweet for any event that I'm at, and we'll see how people respond to it. Well, like I've had events where like I usually have above 50% when I'm predicting the result of the game, but that specific tournament, it just felt like the drafts were very clear who won. And in new patches, especially, I think when teams win the draft, it's even more beneficial just because people are going to mess up. And if they have the naturally better draft, their game plan is going to kind of fall into place more naturally. And so at the start of new patches, I think it naturally benefits teams with a better draft, even more so than it usually does. So that's why I think in this patch specifically, it was a lot of the panel and stuff. We were just talking before the game started on camera, and it's just like, it felt like pretty much everyone was on the same page of what they expected to happen in the game. And that's when you know that the draft does tell you a story. And I think that's really important for the average viewer to be able to see that story and then be able to watch it play out.
Yeah, of course, it's a big part of the game, no doubt. And like you were touching on, I mean, obviously right after such a massive patch that took place, even more reason for the insight being necessary and people wanting to understand why certain things are happening. Well, kind of delving into that a little further, I guess, focusing on this event being the first big one post-patch, we could look at the stats specifically and maybe a couple of cues that were really picked up on. Me personally, I felt like just kind of a general blanket statement is it really felt like that this is a patch from this event, at least, of very aura heavy, very, fighting together, a lot of action, of course, objective based with the outpost introduction and bounty runes in the new placements. I don't think it's that surprising. But, we even see heroes like Viper, for example, that's not necessarily the strongest carry throughout the game, but he's one that can dominate his lane, and then you can play around him earlier on. So Tiny and Puck were the top two most picked heroes. Tiny by far, by the way, over Puck, and it goes down from there. So again, these heroes that really insist on going for action. We don't necessarily see a lot of these sit back and farm heroes like your anti-mage, Phantom Assassins, whatever.
Yeah, it's very situational if you're ever going to pull those off. Anti-mage was really the only one we saw. I don't really know if it had a high win rate. I think overall the games I saw did not do too well. The thing I see about anti-mage is like one little slip up, even if you're having a really good start and the hero seems to just lose. Pretty much just low cooldown fighting. You need to at all times be able to fight, and heroes that can't fight very well just don't operate in this meta. Too many objectives, too many things on the map to get, even just the neutral items. You're fighting for territory. You're fighting for the ability to farm wherever you can on the map. And I think that's the big part that changed is I don't like a lot of people are so concerned about what the neutral items offer and how broken they are and stuff. I more so just treat them as an objective. Both teams get them. And it's a matter of, making sure you hit your power spike with them. They come out 15 minutes. Make sure you are winning enough fights to farm and get those neutral items. Then what if the other team ganks you, knowing that you're going to try to farm? It's another objective to play around. And I think to some extent, at the start of the patch, it was way too much. The outposts every 5 minutes and such. But they've toned it down, I think, really well.
Yeah, they're finding a balance, certainly. And that is an interesting way to look at it, too. And again, something we certainly saw in the event is, it's one thing in your pub games. Like, I noticed that in my pub games where, it's like 8.5, 9 minutes into the game, and I'm like, guys, we don't have any tier 1 items. Wait, we should be in the jungle. In the pro games, you'll see the players literally make a point at 7 minutes to be in the jungle, start farming those stacks, or if there's not one, just a general jungle and making sure to get those tier 1 items as soon as possible. So there really are these marks now at the 7 minutes tier 1 items, at the 10 minutes the outpost, 15 tier 2. It's every 5 to 7 minutes or so that you really have something specific to do now in Dota. And again, that as a result, I think is fair to say, kind of makes action a lot more potent when it comes to the gameplay itself. So, and again, that really does reflect in the heroes. Like, I'm looking at the top 10 heroes that were played at this event. It is just all really heroes that want to fight earlier on than later. I mean, maybe Morphling of that top 10, the one that I guess you could argue not really, but he certainly can bring plenty to the table if fights are about to break out there.
Yeah, the main thing is not necessarily heroes that want to fight all the time. They just have to be capable of fighting. Because if you're not capable of fighting, then the opponent's just going to force it down your throat, and you're going to be just playing dodge game all the game, and they're going to be taking a bunch of objectives. You have to at least have the threat of fighting them so that either you can fight them or they're scared of fighting you, one or the other. So Like with heroes like Morphling, even if he's not the best low cooldown fighter where he wants to be fighting all the time, he absolutely can help his team in fights. So that is on the opposite side of a hero like Phantom Assassin, who needs like 2 items in order to do enough damage to contribute to fights. And also Morphling, very survivable on his own in the laning stage. A lot of the carries that are popular right now, they get ahead with levels. Like once they get level 7 or 8, they're really strong, and they just naturally bully away their offlaners. So even if a carry's a bit greedier like Morphling, he's like a very powerful hero just by getting level 8. Heroes like the PAs and the Spectres, they just don't naturally bully the offlaner even when they get a decent start. So those are the safe laners that we're really looking at being popular. The Slarks, the Morphlings, you know, these heroes that just eventually the offlaner is really scared to walk up, and that's the goal.
Looking at the stats, continuing on that track here, it's always fun to see, you know, win percentages of certain ones. And as far as some of the more popular heroes, Templar Assassin really stands out, man. She was maybe like the 12th picked, 84% win percentage in 19 games. That is pretty damn high. So is that something that you noticed at the event as well?
I just think she fits the meta perfectly. Low cooldown fighting only takes 1 or 2 items to really do all the damage she needs to do, and she just consumes jungle. Like she just eats it for breakfast. Like, you know, no mid laner in the game naturally clears jungle as fast as TA while also being a threat on the map. So I think it's just she didn't receive any buffs. I think she just fits the meta perfectly. So I am honestly surprised at how good she is, but I'm not surprised she's good. I'm just surprised that she was able to be – she was getting like 2nd or 3rd picked and having that high of a win rate. Yeah. By the end of the tournament, teams were first overall picking her. They weren't always winning by any means, but they were not afraid to just first pick a TA. And since when have we ever seen TA just be like –
she's usually a 10th pick.
That's pretty great. Yeah, she's usually like 8th at the earliest, you know. She has to be like a good TA game. But – the kid overall just fits the meta so well that teams are just willing to pick her super early.
Yeah, one that maybe was overvalued a little bit. So the other side of the spectrum right there, you got Shadow Fiend, even played more than Templar Assassin, 28% win percentage. So didn't do nearly as well. I think there was even some games that we saw some safe lane Shadow Fiend amongst the mid Shadow Fiends as well.
We did see that once, yeah. Shadow Fiend, I think, is the same as Anti-Mage. I think they are very powerful in the meta, but if you mess up like one time, the hero just feels really underwhelming. You kind of just throw away your advantage in one fell swoop. Like I mentioned Anti-Mage 2 just because there was like one game on Nico Baby where he had like a 21 minute Scotty Manta Butterfly or Scotty Manta Battle Fury, and he lost because he died once to a Doom. And it's like on SF, it's kind of similar. What I noticed on SF, they were always winning their lane. They're having high impact. And if there was just some time between 20 and 30 where they lost a fight, it felt like the SF kind of just fell off. So I think that's why his win rate was relatively very low.
Yeah. Man, and one more, again, we could obviously talk about this for a long time, but I don't want to stay on it too much here, but this is just a personal thing, and I'm sad to see this. Invoker 0-7 at this event. Oh, man, that hurts. I love watching this hero. I love to play this hero, but 0-7 maybe it doesn't have it. I love the changes to the new Invoke and everything as far as leveling up. It decreases the cooldown, but apparently not good here, so.
I think Quas Exort's a bit too greedy, and I think Quas Wex doesn't do enough damage for the current meta. I think the heroes that are good in the other core roles are just good against Invoker. I think that's really what it boils down to. I also think his laning stage is pretty much he's going to lose to any popular mid laner right now. Like the Vipers, the TAs, the Pucks, they're all just going to dumpster him. Okay. And that's like just not going to cut it in terms of I'm kind of shocked he didn't win a single game, right? It's kind of like when I said I'm not surprised he's not good. Kind of like I'm not surprised that TA is good, but sure. I am surprised at how good TA was, and I am surprised at how bad Invoker was. But definitely does not fit the meta based on what we've been talking about. Is kind of the prime strategy overall.
Yeah. Here, I don't know if you have the Dota buff up, but one other thing actually I think would be fun to look at is there was what was this, 6? So that's 18. 18 heroes were not seen at the event. A trend of a couple of these heroes that I find interesting, because with the idea of all these objectives, you'd figure maybe there's a reason for them, and things like the courier pickoffs, a powerful strategy now. Bounty Hunter, Ricky, Clinks, these invis focused heroes, none of them were picked at all. Again, there's 18 in total. Those are kind of a trend that I noticed that weren't picked. Of these 18, are there any that really stand out to you? I guess it's more 16, because Void Spirit and Snapfire can't be picked. But
okay, so here's the overall trending that I think is really bad in this patch right now. First off, I'll highlight that Jug is just a really bad hero.
Yeah,
that's first and foremost. Secondly, offlaners are very vulnerable to having really bad starts. Tri-lanes are kind of back, at least the threat of them. So a hero like Axe, who's very feast or famine, not going to be very good this patch for the most part. I tried him out a couple times. It felt very underwhelming. Any hero that has damage issues in the mid game, I mentioned the PA, Spectre, even a hero like Visage, until he gets level 12, does pretty underwhelming damage. Witch Doctor is a bit of a surprise to me, but Pudge significantly nerfed when they removed his ability to kill himself in the laning stage. I mean, it's all game, but it was in the laning stage. Yeah. You die to rot at least once or twice. And another set of heroes I want to talk about: Spectre, Tinker, Arc Warden. These heroes, they want a turtle, and that's not good. This patch,
tier 5 items, turtle. Man.
You definitely lost a 30K net worth lead by the time these heroes, get to where they want to go. And that's just the problem with like the turtle metas. There's just too many objectives to be taken. And the other carries, I already mentioned PA, but like the Lunas of the world, they kind of just take too many items in comparison to the other carries. Like I think she would need like one or two big items in order to fight, while these other carries need like drums. And they're ready to fight, So I think that really what boils down to the meta is just taking too long to come online. Surprisingly, I played like 6 pubs yesterday, and I had 5 Rickies in them. I think that and they were good players playing. Like my last game had Arteezy Ricky in it and stuff. So clearly, NA has seen some potential in this hero that was unpicked. The hero was pretty drastically reworked, so I'm not surprised that he might actually be decent, and he just wasn't seen at this event at all.
Sure.
But Invis, I think, goes down in value simply because people are more inclined to be grouped up right now because of all the objectives. You're very often grouped as 3 or 4, and these other heroes that are alone are like, if you're a Ricky, they're just like a troll warlord who has 15, 20 armor at 15 minutes in the game, and you're just not killing that guy. So it's very hard to make them work. And if you're going to pick them, they have to be later on in the draft. And then you have to make the argument, why are they better than just any other hero? Right. So
yeah, that's always the one that really does it. And I think that's kind of like I too was surprised to see the Witch Doctor specifically standing out there, but
that's kind of random.
It's kind of, but again, maybe it is just one of those cases of there's just better options, more comfortable options. It's not that he's bad necessarily right now, but he was not picked up in this event. So. All right, so still keeping topic on the event itself outside of the stat side of things. A couple more talking points is mentioned VG Gaming winning all, looking good doing so. Now, Evil Geniuses, they made it to the finals. They got stomped. Not stomped. It's probably a little too strong, but they lost it 3-0 in the end of the grand finals. Yet another example that they get so close and they can't close it out. I know this is not a DPC event, but I feel like with this having the teamless in it that it did and being able to get so close in the first place, that man, when is this team going to be able to get over this hump of actually winning an event of this prestige, especially? Is it ever going to happen at this rate? I just don't know if I can see it, but they were so close yet again right here, but still coming up short.
I think I talked about this in one of our early podcast episodes. I really don't understand in regards to they're just really good players, very smart players. A lot of success spread across these players. But I've watched EG across lands for the last 2 years or whatever. The fact is, they just don't adjust over the course of the tournament. They come into the tournament with a core strategy. They execute it very well. They're very good. And the other teams like Vici adjust over the course of the meta, and they learn how to deal with EG's drafts, right? And so what happens is EG's just bound to be good enough to make it to the top and then have one or two teams figure them out, and then they lose. It happens every tournament. They just don't change their strategy over the course of it, and that leads to them, by pure skill and understanding of Dota, outplaying and having their strategy carry them to like somewhere between second and fifth, and then they lose because that way of approaching the game, in my opinion, is just not good enough to get first. That's pretty much what I think. And it's amazing to me that it still works that way for them. Like for me, when I watch these type of players, it blows my mind when I watch like Crit stream, and I'm just like, wow, this guy is so good. Like, holy crap. And then you watch them in the tournament setting and they look so good. And then in the last two series, whether it's the third place game or the finals in this case, they're just underwhelming. And it really shows how important strategy is in Dota. That's really what I emphasize.
Any traditional sports fans tuning in, NFL specifically, comparison I like to make is to the Buffalo Bills, man. 4 years in a row, they made it to the Super Bowl, losing all 4 years in a row. It really is. It just feels like it's obviously in this case not making it to necessarily the finals every time, but getting so freaking close. And we know that they are definitely worthy of it, but they just cannot get over that last hump. So
they're in finals contention every single time.
It feels like it. Yeah, they never really have that disappointment in the sense of getting knocked out early, right? I can't think off the top of my head, at least, the last time when, maybe it has happened once or twice before, but overall, it feels like, again, they always make it deep at least. I mean, hell, you look at this event, jumping into that side of things. This was the first event we also got to see LGD, and they didn't even make it out of groups alongside Team Liquid, by the way, who was also pretty disappointing to see not make it out of groups. And I know you were even hyping them up, talking about this seems like a good patch for them now, and obviously coming off a good qualifier there that they had in the European qualifiers for the major. But LGD, going back to them though, man, are you concerned from what you saw from them, or do you think this is going to be it's their first event, let's not overreact?
I'm going to be genuinely honest with you, and I think that a lot of organizations, I talked to, I'm pretty good buddies with Blitz, the coach for Liquid, and I'm using this to answer your question about LGD as well, that teams are realizing that if they want to be good for TI and if they want to be good for the majors, that it's just too much to ask of their players to constantly be at 100% for the entire year. Liquid, straight up, they basically told me they won the qualifiers and they felt really good. And they all had like family that they wanted to spend time with for the holidays. And they just didn't practice at all for this event. And part of them was like almost regretting signing up for this event. The only reason they signed up for it was because there were good teams. And this was they signed up for it right after TI, where they were nervous about making sure they had a decent season, and they were able to get their exposure and practice that they needed to compete with these better teams. And for me, it's like, I hear this, and when I was on competitive teams looking to go to tournaments about 2 years ago, this just wasn't the mentality of really anybody. And I think teams are realizing that taking care of their players is really what it means to have the longevity and have the basically endurance. People don't want to disband. Yeah, the endurance. There you go. That's a good word that I would be looking for. And I think with a team like LGD, I don't talk to them because obviously for the most part they don't speak English. But like, I have to assume to some degree it's just that they probably made some like boot camp or practice schedule to go for the major, and then they just get bumped out in a best of one and the open qualifiers, and they're like, okay, let's go spend time with our family. Like, I'm sure that's what happened. I just have to believe it because like it really does prove how current you have to stay with Dota though. Like how good of a player you could be, and if you just take 2 weeks off on a new patch, that you're just going to look so weak compared to similar caliber players, right? Like you're just going to look so bad, and that speaks to me volumes about the game of Dota itself, rather than about these players. Like, I know for a fact Liquid is going to boot camp really hard for like the 2 weeks before the major, and I'm confident that they'll look at their old form. Am I confident that they'll win or whatever? No, but like, I am confident that they'll look way better at the major than they will at that tournament.
That's fair. No, it's and that also obviously opens up the other discussion of there's no off season really when it comes to these seasons, and how, I mean, the season itself has been adjusting ever since 3 years ago that it was even created, and then before that it was just all third-party tournaments that led into TI, and it was just as chaotic anyways in a lot of ways. So yeah, it is a tough spot, and that is an interesting perspective for a team like Liquid here, specifically. LGD, yeah, they got knocked out in a best-of-1 open qualifier. So, again, they did take a break, obviously, for the first cycle there, and then came back figuring that they would be fine for the second cycle, and then whoopsie. Sure, there's still stuff that may need to be done when you look at the overall length of the season and the expectations of these players, and they are human after all, blah, blah, blah. But on the other side of it, then, again, they're competing for literally millions of dollars at a lot of these events. So it is also hard to sit back and say, you feel sorry for a lot of these players. But for the health of the scene moving forward and the overall wanting to see it continue to succeed and continue to only get better, I do think certainly changes likely need to happen when it comes to the length of the season and how it's ran throughout. But again, it feels like with the adjustments that we've had from year to year that Valve is trying at least to go in the right direction in the long run, but it's going to take time.
I think my major perspective from what I see is that it's becoming harder and harder to be the best because there's just so many good players and so many good teams out there. People are just getting so much better at Dota. Like, there's really no other way to simply word it, right? And I think because of that, it takes that much more effort to be in peak form in terms of being able to compete in tournaments. And I think that because that's just going up more and more, the demand for what it takes to make it is just continuously increasing, that it's just becoming harder and more impossible to do that always. Like, it's just that's a combined factor with what we've already said. Yeah. And I like, it really does take playing 60 to 70 hours a week to be on peak form. That's crazy, that's what it takes. Now tell a guy to do that 52 weeks a year, like God, like, is that really even worth it at that point? Like, you're just going to be miserable. So I think there is going to be a balance, and potentially players are doing it too much, but to some extent it does have to do with just how much better the competition is getting and how quickly it is getting better.
Yeah,
I think that's the main thing.
And again, to both of our points, I think too, again, to be fair, this was a third-party tournament, so these teams had the choice to go to this or not. It's not like they were forced for part of the DPC.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to third-party events, that is on the team and the players and the management, whatever. So that's their decision. And if they're over time now, as you pointed out with Liquid's case, obviously circumstances maybe changed a little bit right there. LGD more so, I guess, but still.
Well, they just weren't sure if they're going to be qualifying for majors, right? For instance, so if you take that in August and you're not sure if you're going to be qualifying for majors, and then you feel like, yeah, we're looking good this season, we're going to be in every major, and then you're like, so when do we take time off? like what if they weren't in this next major? I'm sure they would have treated this tournament like a major. That's what it would have been for them. But then it's just. All I'm saying is, yeah, they're volunteering to go to this tournament, but by the time that you actually go to the tournament, between the time that you chose to go to the tournament, for any of these teams, so much can happen. It's just like with LGD. I'm sure when they accepted this tournament, they weren't expecting to have been knocked out of the open qualifiers for the major at that point. So a lot can drastically affect your mental state or your team's motivation going into an event between the time that you accepted it and when you are actually going. So it's a very fluid system that they have in Dota, with these teams. It's so hard to wrap your head around, even as somebody who's a part of it, and talking to them, it seems like people are still figuring out for themselves what they think is best. How often should we take time off? How often do we need to be in peak form? is it better to be playing 60 hours a week half the year and basically zero the other half, or is it be better to like constantly play 40? What is better? You're investing the same amount of time, but what is better? And I think teams are realizing that it is better to just binge. Like, it actually is just better to binge, and you can't do that all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up there, but I do think it's something that it is to some extent an experiment for these players to be trying to figure out what's the optimal route to consistent performance in tournaments.
All right. Well, for those tuning in to the live show, this is our last show of the 2019 year, of course, and I guess for people,
and of the decade.
Of the so that's true.
Easy to think, right?
Of the decade as well. It's crazy, man. I mean, you think this decade when it comes to Dota 2, it was officially beta was in 2010, I want to say, for the most part. So pretty much has filled the whole decade, yeah. Because TI 1 was 2011, so it probably was around 2010.
I started playing in 2012, so to think where my life's gone in the last 8 to 10 years is pretty crazy.
Yeah,
just the little small decisions you make that pretty much dictate the rest of your life. It can always be insane when you look back on it in a scope of 8 to 10 years, man. It is, and obviously for so many players involved in this game, or spectators and everything, have been whether they've been playing it just casually or watching competitive scene or playing in competitive scene. It's obviously done great things as far as entertainment goes for a lot of us. But what I was getting at there was that we wanted to do being the last show of the year / the decade as well. Wanted to kind of look back a little bit at 2019 and give our opinions, or so some of the look backs as far as what happened throughout the year that really stood out as we do head into 2020 now. 2020. That itself is still crazy to say to me. 2020 is here. Yep.
It seems like 2000 was so recently. I'm an old man though. What can I say? All right, so I figured, starting off strong, starting off with the obvious of 2019, and what really stood out was, the repeat. OG taking TI9 after winning TI8. The double fluke for OG happens. They win both the TIs back-to-back. Now, obviously, very deserving. It's crazy to think that was even a possibility in this game, because so much can happen from, we were just talking about earlier in the show, from the drafts, and you have to really be feeling at that patch. You have to be playing well those couple of days, specifically in TI's case. To do it back-to-back years, absolutely crazy. And in my mind, and obviously there's a little bit of bias with this, probably one of the greatest achievements in all of esports, let alone Dota 2, when you think of the magnitude of this event, of course.
I mean, it's just, I think when they won TI8, people kind of questioned, was it a fluke? Did the stars just align? Not a fluke in the sense that they're bad, but in the sense that, like, was their way of approaching Dota really that optimal, or was it just perfect for that patch? And I think by winning this TI, they have forced everyone at the highest level as well as in the community to reflect upon what this team does that nobody else does. How have they been able to accomplish this so convincingly too at TI9, right? It was convincing. They were clearly the best team at that tournament. And it's honestly just beautiful. I love watching them play. I love watching the overall mentality that team has. And I think that the effect that they have on the community in terms of what they represent for competitive Dota, what they represent for like the team atmosphere, is nothing but good. And I think it's, in a lot of ways, a person like No Tail is just a very pure individual. He just loves the game. He's a good guy. He just wants everyone else to enjoy the game as much as he does. It's just, like, I use the word pure. There's really no better word for me, and I love that about. It's like they are somebody that you want to root for, and that's really cool. So that's what really stood out to me.
Yeah, and I know we could do this for a lot of teams too if we really thought about it, but I don't know. At the same time, I feel like OG has just the most unique storylines with their players too, and as far as the diversity, like right, you have Thompson 2 years ago. We didn't even know who the hell this guy was. He was an average streamer, less viewers than you, BSJ. Right before he went to TI8, and all of a sudden he's winning TI8 and TI9. He's just one. Obviously, you have Seb in his situation, going from coach to then being an offlaner for the team. You know, until you mentioned back in the Honda, is just a pure player and how much he's been through over the years. Anna, of course, like, oh, hey, guys, I'm here. Let's win. All right, bye. I'm leaving. Oh, and I'm coming back for TI9. All right, bye. You know, it's crazy, man, this whole team.
Anna's just a prodigy. I'm just going to be honest. That guy is just gifted. By no means by taking away the fact that he put in a lot of hard work and stuff, but nobody else in the world could just play party queue with his girlfriend and just win TI. So that's all there. That's all I got to say about Anna, man. That guy's just a piece of work in the most honorable, like in the nicest way I could possibly mean a piece of work. So.
Yeah. I can't wait for OG to be back. I'm sure a lot of people agree. Obviously, taking off the second.
I'm more so looking forward to TI10 in that regard, if anything. You know,
sure.
Like, let's see them do. Not even about three-peat. I just want to, like, if they do it, they do it. But I just love watching them at TI specifically. It's such a unique tournament, its own dynamic. A lot of the players really do say, like, it's about who messes up the least at TI. Every other tournament, it's not reliable to rely on other teams to mess up. But at TI, everyone just plays so much worse is pretty much what everyone says. So it's like, who can just bring in the clutch? Who can play their normal level of Dota? Who can treat this like any other pub game? And that's so much easier said than done, right?
It's just so funny to think that, I'm not saying this is going to happen by any means, but the idea of OG could literally not play this whole season and then show up for the qualifiers for TI, qualify for TI, and they would have to be one of, if not the favorite team to win TI10. I mean, the back-to-back champions, they had crazy runs in the first 2 years. It's, an amazing accomplishment of what they've done. And obviously that goes back a couple of years even, but still, it's just OG winning TI9, like I said, not only for Dota 2, but just really esports in general was that certainly deserves a moment of the decade. Absolutely for them. A couple other talking points from TI9 specifically. Of course, the massive event that it is, the biggest prize pool to date for anything as far as esports goes. Well, is it still actually? I just said that because I know Fortnite did do the. Well, that's okay. Let's not get into that topic. Anyways, Virtus Pro finishing 9th through 12th at TI9, and then ultimately disbanding as a team. Essentially, obviously, Solo and No One are still part of the squad, but Roger, Ramses, and Pasha all going other directions. But I bring this up because let's not forget VP for those 2 years, for going to TI8 even and now to TI9, those 2 years, they were one of, if not the most dominant team in Dota 2. They had crazy success at the majors. I know this last season it was more secret, was the number one seed overall, I believe, but they were the second seed. There's reasons to believe that this is a team that, was finally going to break through and at least get something like a top 3, if not win it all. But man, another disappointing performance. We talk about EG having disappointing performances. Virtus Pro, I think you could actually say they were even more disappointing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that just is the complete opposite of OG, where they bring their worst game for TI. That's just what they do. I hate to say it, but that's what they do. They are unable to treat it like any other game, like any other tournament. And they let it get to them. They clearly had some personal issues between players, and it just shows the impact of playing a tournament of the magnitude of TI can have on some of the best players in the world. That's why I think what they do, in contrast to what OG does, is just proof of how hard it is to do what OG does. Mm-hmm. That these other players can try, and they just fail to accomplish exactly what OG is able to do in these tournaments or in these TIs. So it's pretty crazy to me personally. I more so think that their failures highlight the success of OG, if anything. Sure.
Infamous finishing 7th and 8th at TI9. The one last storyline I think from TI9 specifically worth bringing up at least. And, it's 7th and 8th, okay, whatever. But it's more so South America region in general. And that this was really the first time where everyone's like, okay, South America is starting now to really become a region of their own. Let's start actually respecting them a bit more and maybe have some higher expectations as far as what do they bring to the table at the coming seasons, including this one. Now, obviously, so far this season maybe hasn't necessarily been the greatest follow-up, but there's still a long season ahead of us. And this was nothing but positive, though, is fair to say, for South America Dota and the future that it holds.
I just like to see that people, even myself included to some extent, originally started by saying, God, why are we giving this region a slot? Like, they're just so bad. And it then led to, like, wow, everyone's just so happy to see that this region's competitive. Yeah. And instead of being, like, bitching about them being in the tournaments, they're more so, like, rooting for them to prove themselves. And I think that change in dynamic is really healthy for the scene and really cool to see. I think that's the highlight for me, is the fact that people are so excited for them to do well. I think is the best part about it.
And kind of similar topic, Southeast Asia Dota has obviously been a bit more respected in recent years, but TNC winning the major, the first one of the season, certainly helped even jump that much more when it comes to competitive Dota in the Southeast Asia region. Again, we'll see how they continue to follow things up, but I still think a worthy moment that happened throughout this year.
Oh, absolutely. If anything, come on, NA. We need when we do our 2020 review, I want to see the one major that NA has won, man. Because as of now, it's right. It's pretty damn scarce. If I believe it's a fat 0, but correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
I'm sitting here like looking at my ceiling now, like pondering. I can't think of one that they have won. Maybe there's been a couple of wasn't Moomiander on one of the OG squads?
OG, yeah. He was on OG when they won majors.
So I guess player-wise, or technically,
yeah, we have a player that's a major winner. That's what we got going for us.
There you go.
But yeah, no, I just think that a lot of regions are proving themselves, and sadly, NA is not really one of them. But at the same time, I just like to see that it's up for grabs. That's what I'm rooting for, is that competition breeds growth. And now my goal from this growth would be that the level of growth we're seeing in the competitive scene can be seen in the player base. But that's a whole other topic in and of itself.
And then one other moment that stood out to me, if there's more, feel free to bring them up as well. But Vici Gaming of last season, more so, how they won both the minor and the major in back-to-back cycle, or in the same cycle right there. Obviously, as a result of winning the minor, they then qualified for the major, and they went on to win that as well. I mean, that's impressive to go that month straight of defeating the top tier teams in Dota 2 and taking home said prize pool purse and DPC points as a result. Of course, Invictus Gaming came pretty close this last cycle, getting third place at the major after looking very good in the minor. But certainly think it's something as well that's worth pointing out that happened throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more so like the teams at the major have more information on you because you just won a minor. So they have, 12 or 15 games or something of you playing this patch. So it's even more impressive to me that they're able to kind of reveal what they do best and then still make it that far in the tournament.
All right, so as far as memorable moments go, those are the on the list that I had right there. Roster moves of the year, I figured, would be another fun one to kind of take a look at. We've already talked about a couple of them. VP more so than anything, as obviously VP had the blow up there of Pasha, Ramses, and Roger all leaving the squad, and then Resolution coming in. But again, for a team that was really for 2.5 years, was one of the, if not the most dominant team outside of TI, it was bound to happen, especially with the results at TI9. But still a sad moment for the CIS Dota 2 scene. But VP now, it's certainly not like it was in previous years. But again, we'll continue to see how they grow.
I just like to see the fact that you really learn a lot about the captain when you see these types of swaps. And I think Solo's quite a good captain. And VP this season's already come a long way compared to where they started. But I compare it to when one of my favorite heroes is like really good and then he gets nerfed and he's like kind of back down to ground zero, like reset, learn how to play this new hero within their new limitations. And maybe in a few patches, that hero is going to be good again. And it just hasn't gotten there yet. So it's like, VP as a team kind of got nerfed, but they're making do with what they got. And maybe Solo can kind of rally them together, And I think he's doing a great job of working with what he's got. By no means do I think the players are just like strictly worse. It's just like on paper, they did have 5 of the best players in the world, and there's a reason why they all went to good teams. Mm-hmm. But sometimes things just don't work, man. And I think it's better in the long run that they cut their losses than it is for them to try to force the issue.
Another roster move that took place, Ana, and we'll bring him up once again. Again, we let's not forget, this is a player that he actually announced that he was taking a break / semi-retiring, if I'm not mistaken. I remember even hearing that after TI8 took place, and they tried out a couple different players. PyCat and ILTW were players that ended up playing on OG throughout the season, but then Ana officially announced that he's coming back. It was in March time frame, so at that point, still 3 or 4 months before TI. But obviously, fans as well as the team itself, I'm sure, was very happy to hear that, and you talk about. No doubt a massive reason. The whole team's so good, but Ana really is that centerpiece. I'm sure no one would argue that when it comes to a reason why they were able to win both TI8 and TI9. So again, it's really been an interesting road to have a player, win TI and then just basically go away and then come back halfway through the next season and then lead his team to the next TI and then have them win that one as well. So certainly a big deal.
I think if you replace one player on OG, they don't get top 4.
Sure.
Like, I don't even think it's close. Like, I think every single player on that team is instrumental to that team being successful. And I think that that's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no other description than just awesome, in my opinion.
So you think of it that way, too. It's so that was March of the last season. So I guess, we have until March. Maybe they'll take off even another cycle and then eventually come back and do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, what they do with their time, I'm not even going to judge or even question. It's like
they're playing League of Legends, man.
Yeah, they want to. They can do whatever the hell they want. They've earned it, man. Whatever.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. Like, the last thing I'm going to do is critique what they're doing with their time.
Sure.
Like, they did whatever the hell they wanted last year, and then they just walked in and won TI. So by no means am I going to have any authority to critique what OG's doing with their time.
Yeah. All right, and of course the big change of this last year was EG changing their logo. No, I had to do that. Yeah. Anyways, no, the roster change that took place for EG was a pretty big one, and I've discussed this in the past with other co-commentators before. I think we even had a discussion after it happened leading into the season. The idea with EG, it just felt like that they needed to certainly change something. Specifically, it was either build a roster around Arteezy or Sumail. They chose Arteezy. You bring in, obviously that was Sumail and S4 no longer part of the team. Ramses and Abed actually replacing. Ramses, again, the really interesting one going to offlane. Abed coming from Southeast Asia, the new mid player. Pretty big deal. So you kind of look back now when it happened to now. Again, still haven't won that big event, but what do you think? Has it actually been for the better so far, or is it just not enough information yet? Where are we at?
I think it's the same thing as VP. I think eventually in the long term, I don't know if it's better yet, but it's going to be better, 100%. Like, that team did hit its peak. Like, it was not going to get any better just because the limitations of the dynamic of their roster were there. They were finite. And even if sometimes in order to grow, you got to sacrifice a bit in short term. And I think that as of now, they haven't reached what they were. But by the time that it matters, which is TI-10, I'm confident they will be better.
All right. Well, we'll see how that continues to go. Again, work throughout the season, and they got to get over that hump eventually. It feels like it. So this roster change. By the way, I didn't get the chance to watch too many of their games at this event, but any take on Ramsey specifically in that offlane role that stood out to you, or?
I think he's coming along. I think I kind of compare him a lot to Resolution because obviously
Sure.
both CIS, both carry players move into the offlane role, and I think he's looking drastically better. with all due respect to Rezo. I think mainly with Rezo, I think they're very common or very similar caliber of players, but Ramses seems to be very all-around solid on whatever hero he's playing. I feel like sometimes whatever hero Rezo's playing, he just isn't looking comfortable on it. So maybe his pool is limited as of now on Ramses, but the heroes he is getting picked, he seems very confident on, and I can only hope for his future that he continues to grow that pool. And I think that that's the crucial step moving for him forward.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end the recap of 2019, and really just about start to wrap up the show. Of course, at almost that hour mark right here on the Wombo Combo podcast. So, but before one thing, as we look forward to 2020, we considered who's going to win TI10, whatever. Let's not do that now. But something to keep in mind is that there are a couple of free agent players. Again, technically, we're not sure about, I guess, in Sumail's case. We've talked about this before, where he might still be under contract with EG in some ways. So the fact that he hasn't been picked up by a team yet is actually suspicious and really odd there. But where will he end up? That's still a possibility that we have to think about. And then Mid One was actually just officially announced today as we're doing this podcast. Team Secret.
I did not know this.
Yeah, he's no longer a part of Team Secret. Of course, he wasn't part of the official roster. He was still technically on the team as a sub, but now he is inactive, or now he's again no longer part of the team. They did some tribute video to him. It was pretty cool. Well, point is, he's also on the market. So that's another pretty damn good player that's certainly out there that you got to think these higher end teams are going to be looking to make some deals with for both Sumail and Mid One. So where will they end up? Only time will tell, I suppose.
It seems like Mid One's more focused on playing on a Southeast Asian team, from what I understand. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure on that. In regards to Sumail, I really do think it's something on the backs, like behind the scenes with EG. And I mean, I've played with Sumail a lot in pubs. Like, he's just really good, man. Like,
he's number one support and core MMR, I believe I saw.
Yeah, he is. There has to be. It's like when you see something wrong, it's like with your computer, right? You're going to check off, is it the CPU? Is it the GPU? Go through the list. It's like when you have a player and he's not on a team, it's like, is he a piece of shit? No, okay, he's like actually like a decent guy. Is he is it potentially skill? No. Okay, then like at that point, it has to be something. Yeah. And it leaves really something that's not apparent to the average person in the public. That's really all it boils down to. It has to be something like that, and it's kind of unfortunate, but I think it'll get solved out. I think it'll get resolved. I think somebody is either going to be willing to buy him out, or the situation is going to sort itself out.
That's what I think it is. Like you said right there, it's the buyout. And we're talking about a player like Sumail, again, one of the most well-known players, marketable players in all of Dota 2, any region. So I'm sure when it comes to teams interested in him, buying out that contract isn't necessarily cheap. And you have to obviously value that. And there's not a lot of teams and organizations out there that would have even the potential to do so. But anywho, 2020 certainly going to be a great one, as always, especially when it comes to Dota 2. As we start the new decade officially, as well as a new year. It's still crazy to say that, but Dota 2 has been awesome for this first decade here that it's existed, I guess. You go back even to the previous one with Dota 1, of course, but in Dota 2's case, early, again, I want to say 2010 was the early beta stages, and shortly after officially came released. It's been quite the time, but BSJ, anything else before we wrap up, man?
Nah, dude, I think we've said enough, and I'm ready to get back into the groove of the Wombo Combo podcast, get back on track. And I look forward to the next minor major cycle coming up. We've already talked a bit about the teams coming up, and I'm curious. What I said I believe about them, that's coming a lot from what they said, and I'm curious to see who's following through and who's not.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, again, every week on Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern, that's what we plan, obviously, with the holidays here. And BSJ being at the event, we were a little bit off schedule there for these last couple of weeks, but we're still here. Hopefully looking forward to you guys tuning in. And again, next week's show, we will be previewing the minor, the We Play minor, that'll be starting up shortly after next week's podcast right there. So look forward to that. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy New Year. And we will see you in the new year of 2020. Until then, thanks for tuning into the Wombo Combo podcast. We'll see you next time.